Nice. Okay, well, let's start the timer, starting from now. Cool. Well, yes, thanks for joining us. I'm Kane Sims, one of the co-founders of VUX World. If you are familiar with the voice industry, you might know us as having one of the podcasts, along with This Week in Voice and VoiceBot, one of the three kind of podcasts that tend to get spoken of whenever you speak of voice AI podcasts, typically. And we've been doing it for quite a while, 3 years or so, and off the back of that, very quickly got involved in doing consulting work and design and development work and conversation design training and a whole bunch of other things. We've worked with lots of the voice agencies, lots of the large kind of digital agencies, and in recent months been working with end clients as well, specifically around customer service and using conversational AI for customer service. So my background is all in digital transformation and building digital transformation programs and building out and managing transformation teams and things like that. And so we started to apply all of that service design methodology and digital transformation methodology to conversational automation. And we're seeing some really interesting things. And so really what I've got here is a couple of examples of how conversational AI specifically related to customer service is having a really big impact. And so we'll skip through these slides. Essentially, we all know exactly what happened over lockdown. The first lockdown, I think we're in lockdown like 3.0 right now, but the first lockdown when it was all new, loads and loads of contact centers were just absolutely ringing off the hook. And what ended up happening was physical stores were closing, physical locations were closing, whether it's banks or retail or whatever. And all of that demand ended up going online. And there was, the online shopping was brought forward in some demographics by up to 3 years. The older kind of demographic and generation who weren't forecast to be shopping online for a good few years ended up kind of changing their behavior sooner than expected. And what ended up happening was a load of organizations were just run off the feet when it comes to customer service. And so call volumes tripled for some organizations during the months of the summer. But that's not necessarily anything new, because call volumes have been rising excuse me, for many years. And this stat here is from BT, in that 74% of people said that they contacted a contact center in the year prior to the lockdown happening, and that's up from 64% in 2015. And so this rise in demand has been happening for some time. At the same time, last year, there was a 600% increase in the usage of chatbots on websites. And this figure is from Salesforce. And so, there is a huge increase in customer service contact on all kind of channels. And what ended up happening is that, organizations have invested in live chat because they're sick of getting emails. And if anyone gets emails through and you've experienced processing emails, it's just the same as getting a letter through the post. It's a nightmare to process. And so live chat was put in place to try and mediate some of that and stop people calling, stop people from emailing. But the reality is it still takes bodies and people to facilitate that live chat. And over Christmas last year, just gone, loads of organizations, from insurance to debt collection agencies to government organizations to retailers, absolutely ran off their feet with live chat support. And in some cases, a lot of the people we've been speaking with and clients we've been speaking with have had to stop their live chat support and just completely remove it because they can't handle it. Similar, they've had to close contact centers. So over the summer, there's organizations like B&Q. It's a bit like Home Depot in America, right? B&Q, huge retailer, fantastic customer experience on the website, really, really good in-store experience. Had to close the contact center. All the contact centers were on premise. They couldn't mobilize their workforce to work from home. And so, and what ends up happening is that demand goes somewhere. It needs to go somewhere. So it goes to emails, which end up being an absolute nightmare to pick your way through. And so organizations in general have absolutely been through the mill over the last 12 months. And, all of that behavior on online shopping and all that kind of stuff that's being brought forward, usage of voice and all that kind of stuff brought forward. What hasn't been brought forward is the infrastructure, the automation infrastructure to manage that increase in demand. And so lots of organizations have been in a real mess, which is leaving customers feel like this. I've been watching these films lately with Disney Plus. My son's at the age now where I can get away with watching this kind of stuff. So I'm happy about that. And at the same time, staff are feeling like this. They're sad because they've got multiple systems to use and pick their way through. They have to know all these processes inside out. They're dealing with angry customers, frustrated customers. The attrition rate in most call centers is like between 5 and 10%. So there's a high turnover of staff all the time that need to get onboarded and trained up in how to use these things. And then the KPIs are getting squeezed all the time, like shorter calls. You need to have shorter calls, get off the phone, even though that's the only thing that they're there to do. And so it's a real hard time for most organizations. But the savior in this instance is conversational AI, and we're seeing some really, really interesting applications of it. So Accenture forecasts that 80% of customer interactions will be or can be resolved by well-designed bots. And this figure, this little chart here, is from one of our clients. We've been profiling their live chat demand and then profiling what proportion of which can be automated, what proportion of which can be kind of semi-automated, like capturing information up front, then handing over to a live agent, and what's like more complex that needs to be handled by an agent. And that's pretty much almost 80%. 65% we reckon are in the process of automating. 15% is in the process of being semi-automated with a live agent handover. And so if you think of the volume that your customer service team deal with, a medium-sized contact center, probably between 5 and 10 million calls a year. Just imagine even automating 20% of that, taking 20% of that demand away from the agents and freeing up their time to focus on those more complex cases. It's real ROI. The business case writes itself. A load of other things around here. 30% of costs can be cut from simple routine queries. If you were to just automate those very simple, high volume but easy to manage queries, there's a lot of ROI in it for you just to get started with. 67% of customers prefer self-service to speaking to a representative. And if you imagine how many conversations people are having these days with Google Assistant and Siri and Amazon Alexa, the expectation to access self-service on all channels is growing and growing and growing, especially with millennials and younger. And 51%, this is from Gartner, 51% of enterprises apparently will spend more on bots and conversational AI than traditional mobile app development in 2021. I'm not actually surprised by that, because a lot of organizations have got pretty decent apps in the first place, and now there's another layer of intelligence that's in the process of being put on top. How that works in practice? Well, Moscow Airport, they've automated 30% of all incoming calls to the airport using conversational AI. Charles Schwab automated 8,000 calls per day, and that's just routing. That's just people calling up and then the AI routing them to the appropriate person rather than having to speak to one department. They get transferred to another department and then transferred to another department. It's huge potential on the call routing side. The state of Illinois, 140,000 calls per day answered and solved by their conversational AI, and 40,000 of those out of hours. Just think about that. Every single time you close up in the UK, it's 10 to 5 now. So all those contact centers are on the verge of closing, and as soon as the business closes, the contact center closes, which means that all your self-service has to be resolved on the other existing channels. And most of the time, the calls to the contact center start out from those channels because those channels aren't working very well in the first place. And so increasing that kind of support 24 hours a day is a huge benefit. That's almost a third of their calls there. And that's looking at around about $100 million worth of annual savings from doing this. Comwave, we had Justin Randall on the podcast the other week. They've managed to automate, and it's a large telco in Canada. They've managed to automate just 1% of their calls, their total call volume, just 1%. And it's all around raising support tickets, just specific support tickets. My router stopped working. I subscribe to this channel on my cable, but it's not activated yet. Just simple support tickets. And in automating 1% of their call volume, they've got the return on that initial upfront investment in the first 6 months. They've got a return on that investment just from 1% of automation. So the potential is huge. And so the question is, well, how do we even begin? How do we even start? What's the process of doing this kind of stuff? And we always recommend a crawl, walk, run approach. And so the first thing you can do, that very simply, is just to understand the calls that are coming through, profile those to try and understand the intent that users have, and then you can start to understand that graph that I just showed you there, percentage of possible automation, percentage of handover, percentage that need a human involvement. And from there, the priority needs to be based on complexity versus volume. So if it's really high volume but not very complex, you want to start there. That's where you'll get your first initial use cases from. High volume, low complexity. And a lot of time, it doesn't actually require a huge amount of effort to spin up a conversational AI that will answer those more simple kind of queries. It might be things like opening hours. It might be things like having trouble logging into a website. It might be things like understanding how to make a payment or something like that. This is all stuff that arguably could be built into the agent. It doesn't require any line of business system integration, doesn't require anything fancy, just a conversational AI with a bucket full of answers. Once you start proving that concept, you start to generate business value, you start to understand the potential of this kind of stuff, then you can start building on top of it. You can start getting a little bit more fancy. You can start integrating into your knowledge management systems and your CRMs and things like that. Start automating case updates and getting a little bit more sophisticated. Then you understand that the bot can't do everything. And so when you do hand over to a live agent, you want to have another AI there or the same AI there, listening to the call, helping the agent manage that call, recommending knowledge-based articles, recommending transactions based on the conversation that's happening. happening. And the agent can then feed back to that bot and then train it to say, well, actually, no, this isn't about payments, this is about something else. And then the bot gets cleverer and smarter. And so once you're in a position where you've automated some end-to-end conversations, you've got the AI alongside the agent helping to assist the agent, you can then start looking at further enhancements and further automation. You can scale those use cases, and where you don't have API integrations into your line of business systems, you can use robotic process automation to start automating some of those processes as well. And then you're in a position where you have a capable virtual agent that is automating as much as can be automated. It's handing over what needs to be handed over after the upfront automation, and also it's assisting agents live in calls in real time. And then you can start to look at, well, how do we extend that? How do we put that through our other channels, through voice assistants, through your web and mobile apps, through messaging services? And obviously these use cases are going to change because the kind of things that people go to these other channels for might well be different. The conversational design pattern is definitely going to change because they might require a slightly different interface or a slightly different way of communicating on these channels. But the reality is you've built the capability to deliver on your highest volume queries. And so from a customer service perspective, you will get huge value from pushing this into other channels. And then once you've done that, you can start to look even further ahead. You can start to look in front of that purchase funnel and start to get involved in some of those marketing use cases, because you might not be using the same infrastructure and technology on the marketing side, but you understand how the technology works. You've built the internal capability. You understand how to plan, how to execute, how to measure, how to iterate, and all that kind of stuff. And then, there's a whole range of other things beyond the sale as well. The onboarding, handling any kind of fallout and customer service and support and stuff like that. And so this stuff, from a customer service perspective and customer support perspective, has opportunities all the way across the customer journey, across nigh on every single touch point that you have, and every single business process that you have as well. And so we genuinely believe that over the next 5 years or 10 years or so, the default first touch point that you'll have with most organizations will be a conversational AI. Call it an independent voice assistant if you want, call it a virtual agent if you want, or a digital assistant. Doesn't really matter what you call it. The first touch point on the vast majority of channels will be an AI. And that's the kind of the journey that you will go through. Obviously, lots of organizations are at different stages of the maturity, and this is the model that we put together, which we walk through in one of the first discussions that we have, is to try and figure out, where do you sit on this maturity scale? Are you in the process of thinking about it? Have you launched something yet? Are you kind of in an innovation, user or research and development sort of phase? Are you in a proof of concept trying to prove the value? Have you implemented something and you're in the process of understanding what the value is and scaling it? Are you creating a center of excellence to really get some of the benefits from this? Are you devolving it now to different silos within the organization to build up organizational capability in this stuff? And do you think about AI first whenever you come across a new project, a new service, and a new initiative? And so once you understand where you are, you can then put together a plan of action that will help you on that journey and take those next steps forward. And just to wrap up, I think we've got Cognigy speaking next, Derek speaking next, and we're actually doing a workshop with Cognigy next week. And so if any of this stuff that I've been talking about here rings true, and you need a little bit of assistance to try and ground yourself and try and understand what kind of foundations you need to set when you're starting off on this journey, from visioning to road mapping to use case identification and prioritization, to understanding the kind of team and tools that you'll need to execute on this stuff, even to understanding the cultural, organizational barriers and opportunities that you might find along the way and the actions that you need to take next, then by all means search on Google for VUX World Cognigy, and the first link will be a link to this webinar, which you can join. It's interactive, so it's not just going to be sitting there listening to us talk. It's going to be participation. You're going to actually get involved, and you're going to take away a very high level plan of action. And if you don't want to roll up your sleeves and get your hands dirty, then just go to VUX.world. And if you do want to have a chat, we've got a free 20-minute strategy consultation if you just want to pick our brains and understand what your best next steps are. And that's it.